My name is Denny Derwin, and today I'll be sitting down with Arendir the Paladin to talk about his first steps in Azeroth. So, Arendir, you're a Paladin from Elwynn Forest, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about how you got your start there.
Yeah, okay. So, my journey started at the heart of the Stormwind Kingdom in Elwynn Forest. Most people see Elwynn as a serene and peaceful woodland, which is mostly true. It is beautiful, but there's a lot of conflict and danger there, especially in those early days. However, it did end up being the start of the greatest adventure I've ever had.
Well, why don't you just take it from there? Where did that adventure begin for you?
It all started in Northshire, with the echoes of a voice in my head saying, "Now is the time for heroes. Now humanity's greatest chapter can be told." And that's really what kind of set me forth, and it was really my guiding light.
So it's safe to say you wanted to be a hero.
Yeah, something like that. I just wanted to help out the people in my kingdom, the people of Elwynn Forest. Maybe even become a guard one day.
Okay, so you're in Northshire, a voice tells you it's time for heroes. What happens next?
I first got sent to Marshal McBride, and well, I quickly found out that the Stormwind army is stretched too thin. They're dealing with threats from beyond our borders, and that's left room for corrupt and lawless groups to thrive within our borders. I remember him saying, "It is a many-fronted battle we wage. Gird yourself for a long campaign."
Well, that's got to be a lot to take in already on your first day.
Yeah, it was. I honestly didn't understand enough at the time to really grasp all of it. I was just ready to get out there and help people.
So what sort of thing did he end up having you do?
He sent me to clear out some kobolds in the Echo Ridge mines behind the Abbey. It wasn't much of a task, just enough to really give me my first taste of real combat. However, the real excitement happened whenever they sent me over to Amelia Osworth's grape farm. It was littered with a band of thieves calling themselves the Defias. Deputy Willem had me clear them out and wanted me to bring back some red bandanas as proof.
So how did you go about getting their bandanas?
I killed them. Look, I've got a lot of blood on my hands. That's the reality of the world in those days. And honestly, it hasn't changed too much.
Yeah, it can be a harsh reality of the world we live in.
Yeah, I ended up doing a few more tasks for the locals in Northshire, then went to see if Marsh McBride needed anything else. He said there was more kobolds in the mines, but he'd have others take care of it, and he had other work for me to do.
Wow, so you must have made quite the impression on him.
Yeah, he had told me I had proven my interest in the security of Northshire, and that I was now tasked with the protection of the surrounding Elwynn Forest. So, he sent me up to Goldshire to report to the marshal there.
So how are things in Goldshire?
Not any better. I met with Marshal Duggan. He was just happy to have another hand, but informed me quickly Northshire is a garden compared to Elwynn Forest. After reading my report, he had told me I was awarded acting deputy status with the Stormwind Marshals. And like I said, at the time, I wanted to be a guard, so it seemed like I was following the right path.
Must have felt good to be gaining so much experience on your first day.
Yeah, it did, but he was right. He said Elwynn is no picnic. What with most of the army being busy doing who knows what for who knows which noble, the first thing he needed me to do was scout Fargo Deep Mine to check and see if the reports of kobolds were true. But before I left, I visited the inn to get some food, and I met William Pestle. He ran an apothecary with his brother in Stormwind. He was in Goldshire to gather large candles for their wax. He asked me if I could get some for him from the kobolds down in the mines, so I figured while I was there, I might as well help out.
So you went straight for the mines to scout them out then?
Yeah, it was much tougher than the one back in Northshire. These kobolds were more aggressive, and they were very protective of their candles. I scouted enough of the place and got what I came for and slowly made my way back out. But before I headed back to town, I wanted to explore the surrounding farms.
What did you end up finding there?
The Stonefield and McClure farms. There were two families that were bitter rivals. I started at the McClure farm where I had met Maybelle. She had asked me to deliver a love letter to Tommy Joe Stonefield, despite their families being feuding enemies.
Did that seem like a good use of your time?
Not really, but like I said, I wanted to help, so I headed to the Stonefield farm. There I met Auntie Bernice, who accused Billy McClure of stealing her necklace and wanted me to get it back. I felt like I was helping one person, then getting caught up in other problems along the way.
And did anyone else seem to need your help?
Yeah, actually, Ma Stonefield was complaining about the Brackwell's huge prize-winning pig princess that was eating all her veggies. She wanted me to deal with it, but the other farm was ways away, so I decided to set that aside for later.
So, young lovers, a stolen necklace. What happens next?
I found Tommy Joe by the river. He was in love with Maybelle too and asked me to talk to his grandma to find a way to help them. His grandmother had warned that their family's feud had no future. However, she suggested I talk to William in Goldshire for help, maybe a potion.
And how about that necklace?
Well, Billy claimed he didn't take it, but remembered seeing a kobold with a gold tooth in the mine. And all I was thinking was, why didn't I just do this the first time I was there?
So you got the necklace?
Yeah, I killed the kobold, grabbed the necklace, and returned to Auntie. She gave me her late husband's lucky gloves as thanks. He had forgotten them when he had left for his last campaign.
That's a heavy token to receive.
It was. It felt strange, but I thought it was a good way to honor a fallen soldier.
So what next?
I headed back to Marshal Duggan, and he wasn't happy about the kobolds infesting the mines. He had said, "What's next? Dragons?"
And what about the potion for the lovers?
William thought an invisibility liquor would help, but he needed kelp from the Murlocs, and I was a bit nervous about facing them. I had heard Murlocs were extremely dangerous. But I went anyways, and surprisingly, the Murlocs near Crystal Lake weren't as bad as I expected. I got the kelp, and William made the potion. Maybelle took it, and poof, she disappeared.
That seems like quite the journey, and all for love.
Yeah, sometimes you end up helping in ways you really didn't expect.
Did you ever give William them candles?
Oh, yeah, right. He had asked me to take a shipment of them to his brother Morgan in Stormwind, and I was pretty excited just for any reason to visit the city for the first time, so I gladly accepted.
So how was your first time in Stormwind?
Well, I don't want to spend too much time talking about Stormwind since we all know it's the greatest city in all of Azeroth, but man, that first time walking through those gates, seeing the heroes on the bridge, Falstad, Wildhammer, Daneth, Trollbane, Khadgar, and Ilaria, it was something else. I had this feeling of being home, and that feeling still rings true today. No matter where the campaigns take me, Stormwind will always be my true home.
Yeah, for a lot of us dwarves, it's become a home too. So what'd you end up getting into there?
Well, I spoke with Morgan quickly. He didn't have much to say, just a simple thank you. But that shipment, it was just an excuse to get me there. Afterwards, I took time exploring. I stopped by the Stormwind Visitor Center first, then headed over to the auction house. It's hard to even remember the excitement of the first time being in there, you know? I've bought and sold so much since then, it's hard to recall just how thrilling it was back then. After that, I went over to the Stormwind County House, opened a deposit box, and dropped a few things in. These days, it's just full of useless keepsakes. Finally, I visited the Gilded Rose, the most popular inn in Stormwind. I didn't set my hearthstone there yet, but I knew it'd become my main place of rest. I didn't venture too far from the trade district. I was ready to get back to Elwynn Forest. I still had work to do.
So after exploring the mines, dealing with the Stormfield and McClure family drama, and visiting Stormwind, what happened next?
Well, there was a merchant in Goldshire, rid me 2 times, complaining about Murlocs in the east. Apparently the guards were refusing to do anything, so I spoke with Marshal Duggan about it.
And what did he have to say?
His response was actually pretty reasonable. He said that he hadn't received enough official reports to allocate resources. But if I was that concerned, he suggests I speak with Guard Thomas at the Eastern Elwynn Bridge. Thomas had been stationed there for the past couple of weeks and might have more information on the situation.
Sounds like a good lead. What did you end up finding when you headed out?
Well, first on my way there, I'd passed by a farm with a massive pig, and then it hit me. Ma Stonefield had complained about the Brackwell family's prize-winning pig princess. This must be her. So I figured I'd take care of it while I was in the area.
Easy enough, right?
Oh, no, not at all. The entire forest was crawling with Defias, and they were patrolling the area. I had to sneak past him to even get close to Princess. And when I engaged her, she had 2 bodyguard pigs that came charging at me. It was a brutal fight, and I barely made it out alive.
Sounds like quite the ordeal.
Yeah, I managed to kill Princess, grab her collar, and then run for my life with her pigs chasing her right behind me. When I got back to Ma Stonefield, I was seriously pissed. I mean, I ran halfway across the forest, almost died, just to help with the family squabble. Not exactly what I had in mind when I signed up.
Well, that's understandable. But anything else come of it?
Yeah, it gave me some insight into just how bad the Defias problem really was. I hadn't even seen the Brackwells around, just the Defias. But before I could talk to Marshal Duggan about it, I still had to get that report from Guard Thomas at the bridge.
So what did Thomas have to say about the Murloc situation?
Thomas confirmed the rumors were true. Murlocs had settled around the streams of Eastern Elwynn, and they weren't just mindless creatures. They were aggressive and semi-intelligent. He also had mentioned that the 2 guards of his Rolf and Malachi had gone to investigate the area and hadn't returned.
Well, that's concerning. So, what did Thomas end up having you do?
He asked me to find out what had happened to them, either bring back their bodies or report their fate. So I followed the river and eventually found Malachi. His body was half eaten, just lying there at the edge of the river where it feeds into the Stone Cairn Lake.
That's horrifying. What did you do next?
I investigated the area and found webbed footprints leading east along the shore. From there, I could make out a Murloc village in the distance. I assumed that's where Rolf's body would be, and sure enough, I found him.
And how did the Murlocs react when you got close?
They were terrifying. Every time you take one down, another one pops up in its place, screaming a blood-curdling call. It was overwhelming. I found Rolf's body just like Malachi's, torn apart. It took everything in me to fight my way through, and even then, I was barely able to escape without suffering the same fate.
After all that, did you make it back to Gar Thomas?
Yeah, I returned to Gar Thomas and gave him the medallions from both Rolf and Malachi. It confirmed his worst fears. Just like Remy and Goldshire had said, Murlocs were far more dangerous than anybody realized.
Well, that's chilling.
It really is. Nowadays, people treat Murlocs as if they're some cute little cuddly creature, even keeping them as pets, but I've seen what they're capable of. They're not to be underestimated. You know, there's something else that's been bugging me. No one seems to be taking the Defias situation as seriously as I feel like they should. Maybe it's just become part of life for these people.
Do you think it's because they're just used to it, or maybe they don't see it as a major threat?
It could be. I met a lady named Sarah Timberlane over at the Eastville logging camp. She was making linen goods, and she seemed pretty aware of the Defias presence. She told me the Defias in Westfall wear red burlap masks, but the ones here in Elwynn wear linen. She offered to fashion me something if I could bring her some of their red bandanas.
So going out to grab some more red bandanas.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I ended up killing plenty of them and gathering enough of the red linen. Now, I didn't exactly need anything from their gear, but any reason to go after those thieves seemed like a good idea.
So what did she make for you?
So when I returned, she made a belt out of red linen for me, which I ended up discarding. But the belt wasn't even the real reward. It was simple. A red linen shirt. It's funny, you don't think about it at the time, but I still have that shirt. In fact, I even wear it from time to time all these years later.
Yeah, it's interesting how something like that, so insignificant at the time, can really stick with you.
Yeah, it's just one of those little things you don't realize you'll even keep, but it ends up meaning a lot to you down the road.
So where did you go from there?
Well, Thomas had me tell Marshal Duggan about the deaths of Rolf and Malachi and hoped he would be able to send reinforcements.
So what did the Marshal have to say about it?
He said the defenses are already stretched too thin. Losing those two makes the situation even worse. He feared there would be fighting in Goldshire by the week's end if things didn't improve.
So was he able to send any troops?
I never found out. After that, he informed me the garrison on the western border had sent word of increasing gnoll and thief activity. I can only assume he's talking about the Defias. The garrison is requesting reinforcements, but they just don't have any soldiers to spare, so he asked me to speak with Deputy Rayner and see what needs to be done.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Definitely. I met with Deputy Rayner, and right off the bat, he expressed his hopes that I was there to bolster their ranks. With all these beasts and thieves spilling into Elwynn, they barely had enough men to keep the road safe.
Not exactly a pleasant place to be, I imagine.
Yeah, the situation was dire. He also mentioned a notice about a beast in the woods named Hogger who had needed to be dealt with. Apparently Hogger was a huge threat. He was a large gnoll that had overpowered any attempts at his capture, and Deputy Rayner suggested I get a band of adventurers together to take him on.
That sounds like the most dangerous task yet.
I'll admit it, I was scared, but I started hunting down gnolls, picking off stragglers that separated from their packs. Half of them didn't even have the armbands. But while I was killing the gnolls, I found a schedule with information about a person called the Collector. It listed out days and times when they would receive shipment of Defias gold from the Elwynn mines. From the schedule, it looked like the Collector was based near the Brackwell pumpkin patch. That made me worried, since I had a bad feeling about that area already.
And you weren't wrong to be concerned.
No, not at all. The schedule mentioned the Collector would be known by a ring given to him by the writer. After gathering what I could from the gnolls, I decided to investigate further. Then I saw him. Hogger. He was alone, or maybe he was waiting for me. I was covered in sweat and blood, some of it mine, and I froze.
So were you able to face him?
I'm ashamed to say it, but no, I ran.
So this would be the first challenge you backed down from?
Yeah, I gathered my composure and just went back to fighting gnolls. As I said, it was tough finding the armband, so I decided to push my luck and take on a full pack of them.
You tried to get them by yourself?
Yeah, but that wasn't for long. Just as I started fighting the first pack of gnolls, a wolf came from behind and attacked them, and then out of nowhere a dwarf appeared blasting through the fight with a blunderbuss.
I'm sure that was a welcome surprise.
It was, and he didn't speak a word, just went right to work. Together he and I made quick work of the pack. Afterward, he asked if I was planning to take down Hogger, and I was still scared, but with his help, figured I'd give it a shot.
Ah, so you've got backup this time, right?
Exactly. We went to where I'd seen Hogger earlier, and the dwarf thanked me for not taking out Hogger before, because he was wanting credit for the kill as well. I laughed it off, though. The real reason I hadn't attacked him was because I was just too damn afraid.
So how'd the fight go?
The wolf charged in, and the dwarf peppered Hogger with shots. I jumped in right behind him. Hogger focused on the wolf. He seemed to think he was the greatest threat. The fight wasn't long. It was quick, and it was a lesson. When facing the greater challenges, the right companions can make all the difference.
A lesson I imagine you'd take with you.
Yeah, it was a valuable one. After we defeated Hogger, I returned to Deputy Rainer and gave him the painted gnoll armbands. He was grateful. Then I headed back to Marshal Duggan about the news of the Collector and the large paw of Hogger.
So what did Marshal Duggan make of the Collector?
He was surprised. Apparently no one had worked in the Elwynn mines for months. He had heard of the Collector, but didn't know who he was working for. However, he was certain if the Collector was taking gold from the mines, he was stealing from the kingdom.
What was his plan?
Duggan wanted me to bring the Collector to justice and return his ring, hoping it would lead us to who he was working for. So I'd headed back to the Brackwell pumpkin patch. I found a house with 3 people inside. One of them had on a ring, so I figured it was the Collector.
But you were alone this time, right?
Yeah, the dwarf had left for Westfall, so I had to think fast. I ran in going for the Collector first. It wasn't easy, but when I noticed one of his lackeys preparing a fireball, I ran outside to hide behind a tree to break his line of sight, hoping that this would force him to run towards me, and it worked. I took down the Collector and moved on to his other lackey, an axe-wielding man. I repeated my strategy of breaking the mage's sight by running back into the house and took down the Axeman. Finally, all that was left was the mage, which was easy enough once I had closed the distance.
Sounds like a difficult fight.
It was, but I managed to pick them off one by one. The ring the Collector wore was engraved, "For years of service, EVC." I knew this might be the key to understanding who they worked for, so I took the ring and returned to Marshal Duggan.
And what did he say?
He joked that the Collector wouldn't be collecting anything from the Elwynn mines again, but the ring confused him. He said it was a membership ring from the old stonemasons guild in Stormwind. He didn't understand why a thief would have it or why the Defias would be collecting money from our mines. He had hoped one day to get those answers.
And that's where the story ends?
For Elwynn, yes. There were more Defias in Westfall, so my next step was to find Grain Stoutmantle at Sentinel Hill. He headed up the militia there, so I figured I could help out. And maybe, in the process, learn more about the Defias and the Collector's plans.